9 seconds. That's how long it took for Griffin Stroud to destroy himself. The CEO's refusal to shake Darius Langston's hand, captured on camera, shared millions of times, revealed more than prejudice. It exposed vulnerability. Behind Darius's calm exterior lay a meticulously crafted plan decades in the making. His father's wrongful conviction, his silent accumulation of global wealth, his strategic positioning of allies inside Stroud's empire, Naomi Clark, who'd risked everything to bring Darius to the table, Victor Reed, who'd gathered evidence of Griffin's corruption for 15 years, and even Harper Stroud, increasingly disgusted by her father's true nature. Griffin mistook Darius's quiet demeanor for weakness, never suspecting that the handshake he so casually refused would trigger the complete dismantling of his corrupt dynasty. Some called it revenge. Darius called it justice. Either way, it had already begun. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The Investors Summit buzzed with anticipation. 300 of the most influential names in finance and technology had gathered in the grand ballroom of the Westbrook Hotel, where crystal chandeliers cast a soft glow over tables draped in white linen. The air was thick with expensive cologne and ambition. At the entrance, a man in a simple charcoal suit approached the security checkpoint. No entourage, no flashy accessories, just a quality watch and quiet confidence. The security guard glanced up with thinly veiled suspicion. "Name?" he asked, tone-clipped. "Darius Langston." The man replied softly. The guard's eyes flicked to his tablet. His expression shifted instantly. "Mr. Langston, I apologize, sir. I didn't recognize." "It's fine," Darius said with a small smile. "I prefer it that way." As the guard hastily stepped aside, Darius moved into the crowded reception area. Nobody approached him. Nobody recognized the man whose investment portfolio spanned 5 continents, whose equity-focused funds had disrupted traditional market structures, whose name appeared in financial journals, but rarely in tabloids. And that was exactly how Darius preferred it. Across the room, Griffin Stroud commanded attention at the center of an admiring circle. His tailored suit emphasized broad shoulders, and his silver hair was perfectly coiffed. His laugh carried over. The crowd, practiced, calibrated to sound both genuine and important. "Right this way, Mr. Langston," a young event coordinator whispered, materializing at Darius's side. "The keynote begins in 5 minutes." Darius nodded and followed, catching sight of Naomi Clark near the stage. She was deep in conversation with an older board member, her posture tense despite her composed expression. When she spotted Darius, relief flashed across her face. She excused herself and crossed to him quickly. "You made it," she said, extending her hand. "Thank you for coming." "I said I would," Darius replied, his handshake firm but brief. "Everything set for the announcement?" "Yes, though Griffin changed the script again this morning." Something flickered in her eyes, irritation, perhaps concern. "Just, be prepared for his usual theatrics." The lights dimmed, and a spotlight hit the podium. Griffin Stroud strode onto the stage with the confidence of a man who had been born into wealth and had multiplied it tenfold. The audience quieted immediately. "Welcome to the future," Griffin began, voice resonant with practiced sincerity. "Today at Stroud Dynamics, we're not just changing the game. We're creating an entirely new playing field." For 20 minutes, Griffin outlined his company's vision, peppering his speech with carefully selected buzzwords: innovation, disruption, diversity. With each mention of diversity, Darius noticed Naomi's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. "And that brings me to our most exciting announcement," Griffin said, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Stroud Dynamics is proud to welcome one of the most brilliant minds in global finance to our executive investment team." A murmur rippled through the crowd. This partnership represents everything we stand for: breaking barriers, embracing fresh perspectives, and most importantly, Griffin paused for effect, recognizing talent regardless of background. Darius felt Naomi's subtle touch on his elbow. His cue. Please join me in welcoming our newest partner. Griffin's arm swept dramatically toward the side of the stage. Darius Langston. Applause erupted as Darius walked calmly to center stage. Griffin's smile was camera-ready, all white teeth and crinkled eyes. Darius extended his hand. The moment stretched. 1 second. 2. Griffin's eyes flicked to Darius's outstretched hand, then away. As if suddenly distracted, he turned to adjust the microphone stand, leaving Darius's hand suspended in empty air. The silence was deafening. To anyone watching, it might have seemed accidental, a simple case of mistimed gestures. But the look in Griffin's eyes had been deliberate, dismissive. The message was clear. You're here because I allowed it. Darius didn't flinch. His expression remained neutral as he lowered his hand and stepped back slightly. No reaction, no visible offense taken. Mr. Langston brings exceptional expertise to our team, Griffin continued smoothly. His insight will be invaluable as we expand our global initiatives. The speech concluded. Pictures were taken, contracts were prominently displayed and signed for the press. Through it all, Darius maintained his composure, offering brief professional comments when directly addressed. Few noticed the cell phones that had captured the moment, the extended hand, the deliberate turn away. Few except one sharp-eyed junior reporter, who immediately recognized what she'd witnessed. By evening, the clip had gone viral. In her sleek downtown apartment, Naomi paced before a wall of windows overlooking the city lights. Her phone buzzed, constantly with notifications. Not your token. Stroud snub. Chach. Darius deserves better. The clip played on repeat across social media platforms, slowed down, analyzed, dissected. News channels debated whether it had been intentional. Corporate culture experts weighed in on microaggressions in the workplace. Griffin's history of performative allyship was suddenly under scrutiny. Naomi's phone rang. Walter Kane, Stroud's PR director. Have you seen it? He demanded without greeting. Of course I've seen it, she replied. The whole world has seen it. This is a nightmare. The board is in panic mode. We need Langston to issue a statement immediately, something conciliatory. Can you reach him? I've tried, Naomi said, which wasn't entirely true. She'd composed and deleted 3 messages to Darius but sent none. He's not responding. Keep trying. Tell him we can spin this, make it a moment of unity. Griffin will issue an apology first thing tomorrow. Will he, though? Naomi cut in. Will he actually apologize? Or will it be another non-apology about regrettable misunderstandings? Walter's silence was telling. That's what I thought, she said. I risked my reputation to bring Darius to the table. You have no idea what this partnership could have meant for Stroud, for all of us. Just fix it, Naomi, Walter snapped. That's your job. Fix it before the Asian markets open. The call ended. Naomi closed her eyes, remembering the boardroom discussion 6 months ago when she'd first proposed approaching Darius Langston. He's difficult, Griffin had said then. Doesn't play the game. He doesn't need to play games, Naomi had countered. His investment record speaks for itself. What she hadn't said. Darius represented everything Stroud claimed to value but actually feared. True disruption of the status quo. Her phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. This will play out exactly as it should. Watch closely. Naomi stared at the message for a long moment before saving the number under a single initial. D. Meanwhile, in a sleek penthouse overlooking Central Park, Darius stood at the window. On a muted television behind him, the clip played again. His own face stared back at him. Calm, composed, dignified in the face of disrespect. He turned away from the screen, moving to his desk where a single manila folder lay open. The label read, Project Phoenix, Contingency Protocol. Inside were documents, financial records, corporate histories, years of research compiled into actionable intelligence. Information was power, and Darius had been gathering both for a very long time. He closed the folder and poured himself a glass of water. No alcohol tonight. He needed clarity. His phone lit up with hundreds of messages. Journalists, talk show bookers, social media managers offering to help him leverage the moment. He ignored them all. Instead, he opened his contacts and pressed a single name. Victor. "It's time," he said when the call connected. Initiate Phase 1. No elaboration needed, no emotional discussion about what had happened. They'd prepared for this, or something like it, for years. "Understood," came Victor's calm reply. "And Griffin?" Darius looked again at the television screen, where financial analysts were now discussing potential impacts to Stroud's stock price. "Griffin Stroud," Darius said quietly, "just made the biggest mistake of his life." The courtroom was silent except for the rhythmic tapping of the judge's pen against his bench. 9-year-old Darius sat rigid beside his grandmother Gloria, her weathered hand clasping his small one. "In the matter of Thomas Langston," the judge intoned, "this court finds the defendant guilty of all charges." Darius's father, tall, dignified even in prison orange, turned slightly to meet his son's eyes. A private message passed between them: "Be strong." As the bailiff led Thomas away, Gloria leaned down to whisper in Darius's ear. "Remember this day," she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "Power is never given, it's taken." 27 years later, Darius still remembered her words as he reviewed the documents Victor had compiled. On the screen before him was a complex flowchart mapping media responses to yesterday's incident. Dozens of seemingly independent commentators, all pushing the same narrative. An unfortunate misunderstanding blown out of proportion. "They're good," Victor noted, pointing to a particular cluster of influencers. "Started within 30 minutes of each other. Same talking points, different wording. Kane's got a solid PR machine." Victor Reed had been Darius's right hand for 15 years. Dark skin, closely cropped hair starting to gray at the temples, always impeccably dressed. His legal mind was razor sharp, but his real talent lay in strategy, the ability to see patterns where others saw only noise. "What's their endgame?" Darius asked. "Three-pronged approach," Victor replied. "First, minimize. It was an accident, not intentional. Second, humanize. Griffin's under pressure, he's sleep-deprived, he's actually a champion for diversity. Third, redirect. Look at all the good Stroud is doing elsewhere. And if that fails, they'll sacrifice someone, not Griffin, of course. Probably blame some mid-level event coordinator for a miscommunication." Darius nodded slowly. "What about Naomi?" "Already being isolated. Removed from 3 executive email chains since last night. Meeting invitations rescinded. They're setting her up as the scapegoat if needed." A muscle tightened in Darius's jaw, the only visible sign of his anger. "Accelerate the timeline," he said. "I want our team ready in 3 days, not 5. Victor nodded. "I'll make the calls." Naomi felt the chill the moment she entered Stroud headquarters. The security guard who usually greeted her by name suddenly needed to check her ID. The elevator that had automatically stopped at the executive floor for years now required her to swipe her access card twice. By the time she reached her office, the message was clear: she was being frozen out. Her assistant Jenny met her at the door, voice hushed. "They've moved your 9 a.m. to a conference room on 17. Nobody told me until 5 minutes ago." "Which meeting?" "Quarterly strategy, the one you're supposed to lead." Naomi checked her watch. "It starts in 3 minutes. Why move it?" Jenny looked uncomfortable. "They're saying the projector in the main boardroom is malfunctioning." "That's convenient," Naomi murmured, grabbing her tablet. "Who authorized the change?" "Mr. Stroud's office, of course." She'd been Griffin's golden recruit until yesterday, the brilliant black woman who made Stroud look progressive while never rocking the boat. Now she was a liability. The 17th floor conference room was small and stuffy. By the time Naomi arrived, all seats at the table were taken. Junior executives who normally wouldn't attend such a meeting filled the chairs, avoiding her eyes. "Naomi, there you are," Griffin said jovially from the head of the table. "Sorry about the last-minute room change. Technical difficulties." The projector, allegedly broken in the main boardroom, worked perfectly here as Griffin launched into a presentation that should have been Naomi's. "While we appreciate Naomi's efforts with the Langston proposal," Griffin said smoothly. We'll be restructuring our approach given recent developments. The meeting continued for an hour. Naomi was not called on once. Afterward, as executives filed out, Griffin stopped her with a hand on her shoulder. A word? His tone was pleasant, his grip uncomfortably firm. When they were alone, his demeanor shifted. You're too emotional about this Langston situation, he said flatly. I need people who think with their heads, not their feelings. This isn't about emotions, Naomi replied evenly. It's about business. You deliberately snubbed a potential partner worth billions, and now you're trying to contain the damage. What I did or didn't do is irrelevant. The point is, you brought him to the table. You vouched for him. You need to fix this. Fix what exactly? The fact that you couldn't bring yourself to shake his hand? Griffin's expression hardened. Watch yourself, Naomi. Your performance has been inconsistent lately. Some might question your commitment to this company's success. The threat was clear. Fall in line or fall away. Naomi's face revealed nothing, but her stomach nodded. After what happened at her last company, being blacklisted for whistleblowing, she couldn't afford another career disaster. I understand, she said finally. Good. Griffin's smile returned. I knew you were smart enough to see the bigger picture. As he walked away, Naomi fought the urge to quit on the spot. But she had responsibilities, her mother's medical bills, the community program she quietly funded in the neighborhood where she grew up, and she had a text message from Darius Langston. This will play out exactly as it should. In another part of the city, Harper Stroud sat cross-legged on her apartment floor, surrounded by documents. At 26, she had her father's sharp blue eyes, but none of his calculated charm. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she chewed absently on a pen cap as she sorted through the papers. As head of Stroud's Sustainability Division, a position created largely for publicity, Harper had access to files most employees never saw. What had started as routine environmental compliance research had led her down a rabbit hole of troubling discoveries. Her phone buzzed. Her father. Need you at damage control meeting. 3 p.m. Bring sustainability numbers. Make them good. Harper sighed. She'd seen the handshake video, of course. Had argued with her father about it last night. It was an accident, he'd insisted. I didn't see his hand. I watched the video, Dad. Everyone watched the video. It wasn't an accident. Now he wanted her to massage numbers to improve the company's image. The irony wasn't lost on her, using environmental data to distract from a racial slight. Her attention returned to the documents before her, financial reports, acquisition histories, board minutes from subsidiaries. Buried within the bureaucratic language were patterns she couldn't ignore. Minority-led startups acquired, then systematically dismantled. Clean energy initiatives announced, with fanfare, then quietly shelved. Community commitments broken the moment public attention shifted. The Stroud legacy was built on broken promises. Harper gathered the most damning files and locked them in her personal safe. She wasn't sure what she would do with them yet, but she knew one thing. She couldn't be complicit any longer. At an exclusive, private club in Manhattan, Victor Reed sipped mineral water watching Walter Kane across the room. Stroud's PR chief was deep in conversation with a Wall Street Journal editor, gesturing emphatically. Victor waited until the editor left before approaching. Walter, he said pleasantly. Busy day? Kane's face tightened. What do you want, Reed? Just saying hello. Old friends catching up. We're not friends, Victor smiled. No, we're not, but we do have mutual acquaintances. If you're here about yesterday's misunderstanding, Victor repeated. Interesting choice of words. What would you call it? I'd call it a glimpse behind the curtain, a revealing moment of truth. Kane leaned forward. Listen carefully. Your client is out of his depth. Griffin Stroud built this industry. He's survived recessions, scandals, and a dozen upstarts who thought they could take his throne. Perhaps, Victor conceded, but none of them were Darius Langston. What's that supposed to mean? Victor took a leisurely sip of his water. It Means Mr. Stroud should be careful about his Cayman accounts, particularly the ones not registered under his own name. Kane's face drained of color. How did you— We're not playing chess anymore, Walter, Victor said, standing to leave. This is war, and wars have casualties. As Victor walked away, his phone vibrated with a message from Darius. It's begun. Multiple whistleblowers coming. Forward. Prepare for acceleration. Late that night, Naomi returned to her office to find her door slightly ajar. She paused, certain she'd locked it earlier. Inside, everything looked untouched at first glance. Then she noticed her laptop, or rather, not her laptop. The computer on her desk was identical to hers, but a tiny scratch on the cover, her laptop's distinguishing mark, was missing. As she moved closer, she saw a note folded beside the keyboard. In clean typed letters, "You're being watched." Naomi's pulse quickened. She didn't touch the laptop or the note. Instead, she backed out of the office, pulling the door closed behind her. In the elevator down to the lobby, she sent a text to the number saved as D. They're moving faster than expected. What's the next play? The response came as she reached her car. Meet me tomorrow. 6 a.m. Lincoln Memorial. Come alone. Naomi started her car, unaware that across the city, Harper Stroud was receiving a similar message. The game had shifted from corporate politics to something far more dangerous, and the pawns were beginning to move on their own. The Lincoln Memorial stood silent in the early morning light. At 5:58 a.m., Naomi Clark walked up the marble steps, her breath visible in the crisp air. Two other figures were already there, Darius Langston gazing at Lincoln's inscribed words, and Harper Stroud, arms crossed tightly against the cold. Naomi hesitated, surprised to see Griffin's daughter. I didn't realize this was a group meeting. Neither. Did I? Harper said, her tone cautious but not unfriendly. Darius turned to face them. Unlike the polished businessman from the Investors' Summit, today he wore dark jeans and a simple black coat. More authentic somehow. More dangerous. Thank you both for coming, he said. I thought it was time we spoke. Openly. About what happened at the summit? Naomi asked. About what's been happening for decades. Darius gestured toward the bench beside him. Please. As they sat, the vast memorial empty except for them, Darius spoke quietly. The handshake was never the real issue. It was just a symptom. My father says it was a misunderstanding, Harper began. We both know that's not true, Darius replied gently. But more importantly, we all know Stroud Dynamics isn't what it appears to be. Harper's eyes widened slightly. What do you know? About Stroud? Everything, Darius said. The acquisitions designed to eliminate competition, the false environmental reports, the systemic dismantling of minority-led initiatives. Naomi looked sharply at him. How long have you been investigating? Griffin? Long enough. Darius turned to Harper. Your sustainability reports are being manipulated. You found evidence of this yourself, haven't you? Harper's face paled. How could you possibly know that? Because I've spent years tracking companies, like Stroud. I know how they operate from the outside and the inside. He paused. I also know what your father did to my family 27 years ago. Silence fell between them as a jogger passed by, headphones in, oblivious to their tension. What do you want from us? Naomi finally asked. Nothing you don't already want. Yourselves. Darius stood, hands in his pockets. Change, justice, truth. And how exactly do you plan to achieve that? Harper's voice held a challenge. Darius smiled slightly. It's already begun. 3 days later, without announcement or press release, the business world was rocked by a seismic shift. Neuratech, a software company that provided critical logistics programs to Stroud's global shipping division, had been acquired by an anonymous investor. By noon, the identity of that investor became clear. Darius Langston now controlled 51% of Stroud's technological backbone. Griffin Stroud paced his corner office, cell phone pressed to his ear. How the hell did this happen? Neuratech wasn't even on the market. On the other end, Walter Kane struggled to explain. They approached individual shareholders privately, offered premiums we couldn't match. It was over before anyone knew it had begun. Can we switch providers? Not without significant disruption. Their software is embedded in our entire operation. It would take months to transition. Griffin slammed his fist against his desk. He's forcing my hand. Sir, there's something else. Walter hesitated. The SEC has initiated an audit of our carbon credit reporting. Someone tipped them about discrepancies going back 5 years. Griffin froze. Who authorized our reports? You did, sir. All of them have your signature. The silence that followed was deafening. At the same time, across town, Naomi walked into her department to find security guards escorting Marcus Chen, a junior analyst, from the building. The young man's face was ashen as he clutched a small box of personal items. What's happening? She demanded, intercepting them at the elevator. Ms. Clark, please step aside, one guard said. This doesn't concern you. The hell it doesn't. Marcus reports to me. Marcus looked up, his expression pained. It's okay, Naomi. Not your fault. What's not my fault? Mr. Chen violated our confidentiality agreement, an HR representative said, appearing behind her. His termination is effective immediately. Naomi turned to Marcus. Is that true? Before he could answer, the elevator arrived and the guards ushered him inside. His last look at Naomi was one of silent warning. Later, reviewing security footage she wasn't supposed to have access to, Naomi discovered the truth. Marcus had been seen speaking with her in the break room too often, sharing lunch, laughing. His termination had nothing to do with confidentiality. He was being punished for supporting her. She was being erased, one ally at a time. That evening, in the Stroud family's Upper East Side townhouse, Harper faced her father across the dining table. You've been avoiding me, Griffin said, cutting into his steak. 3 family dinners missed this month. I've been busy with the sustainability audit, Harper replied, pushing food around her plate. Ah yes, your little pet project. Griffin's tone was dismissive. Any interesting findings? Harper set down her fork. Actually, yes. Our carbon neutrality claims don't match our actual emissions, not even close. Griffin continued eating, unperturbed. Business involves certain creative presentations of data. You'll understand when you've been in it longer. Creative presentations? Harper's voice rose. Dad, it's fraud. We're lying to shareholders, to the public. It's called competitive positioning. It's called breaking the law. Griffin's calm facade cracked. Don't lecture me about how to run my company. Your company shakes hands with arms dealers and oil barons, Harper shot back. But you can't shake one man's hand because he scares you. Griffin's knife clattered against his plate. Darius Langston doesn't scare me. He's a nobody who got lucky with a few investments. He owns Neuratech now. Griffin stared at her. How do you know about that? Harper stood. Unlike you, I actually read the reports from our tech division. You need to be careful, Harper. Company information is confidential, even from your little activist friends. Is that a threat? Griffin dabbed his mouth with a napkin. It's a reminder of where your loyalties should lie. Over the next 48 hours, Stroud stock fluctuated wildly as rumors spread that Darius was backing out of all potential partnerships. By closing bell on Friday, the company had lost $1.4 billion in valuation. An emergency board meeting was called. In a wood-paneled room overlooking Manhattan, 12 board members voted on Griffin's leadership. 6 supported him. 5 opposed him. 1 abstained. He survived, but barely. As board members filed out, Griffin cornered the abstainer, Richard Mills, a longtime friend. I expected your support, Griffin said coldly. Mills looked uncomfortable. Griffin, you need to make this right with Langston. The company can't afford this battle. There is no battle. It's a temporary market fluctuation. Is that what you call the SEC audit too? A fluctuation? Griffin's eyes narrowed. Who told you about that? Mills shook his head. Everyone knows, Griffin. Just like everyone saw what happened at the summit. You need to make a public apology. I will not grovel to Darius Langston or anyone else. This company was built by my father and grandfather. We don't bend to pressure. Then you might break instead, Mills replied quietly, walking away. The following day, Darius broke his public silence, not with a statement about Griffin or Stroud dynamics, but with a televised interview on business innovation. For 30 minutes, he spoke eloquently about ethical investing, corporate responsibility, and the need for systemic reform. Not once did he mention the handshake incident or Griffin Stroud. He didn't need to. Everyone watching understood the subtext. In his office, Griffin watched the interview with growing rage. He thinks he's untouchable, he muttered. Walter Kane, seated across from him, looked nervous. Sir, we have a more immediate problem. Someone's been leaking internal documents to journalists. What documents? Board minutes, financial reports, communications about minority-led acquisitions that were subsequently dismantled. Griffin's face darkened. Naomi, we can't confirm that. Who else would it be? She brought Langston to us. She's been his ally from the beginning. We need solid proof before we make accusations. Then get me proof, Griffin snapped. I want her gone by the end of the week. Unaware of the target on her back, Naomi was meeting with an investigative journalist from the Washington Post at a cafe far from Stroud headquarters. Victor Reed sat beside her, providing legal cover for what they were about to do. These documents are legitimate? The journalist asked, scanning the files on her tablet. Everyone, Naomi confirmed. Board approvals for initiatives that were later canceled without explanation. Financial records showing systematic defunding of diversity programs despite public commitments. And you're willing to go on record? Naomi glanced at Victor, who nodded slightly. Not yet, she said. But these documents speak for themselves. The sources are protected under whistleblower statutes. The journalist looked skeptical. Stroud has an army of lawyers. So do we, Victor replied smoothly. And unlike Stroud's, ours actually respect the law. After the journalist left, Naomi turned to Victor. How bad will the blowback be? Significant, he admitted. Are you prepared for that? She thought of Marcus being escorted out, of the growing isolation, of Griffin's thinly veiled threats. I've been preparing for years, she said. I just didn't know it. Walter Kane's office was in chaos. 3 different news outlets had just published damning exposés on Stroud's internal practices. His phone rang constantly with journalists seeking comment. Meanwhile, Griffin was demanding he identify the leakers immediately. In desperation, Walter called an emergency meeting of his PR team. 20 somber-faced employees gathered in the conference room. Someone in this company is actively sabotaging us, he began, eyes scanning the room. I want to know who. A young intern raised her hand hesitantly. Sir, I noticed Jared from graphic design accessing board documents last week. He doesn't have clearance for those. Walter pounced on this information. Get security. Have them escort Jared to my office immediately. An hour later, a confused graphic designer had been terminated, his company devices confiscated, his reputation in tatters. He wasn't the leaker, of course, but Walter needed a scapegoat, and Jared was convenient. What Walter didn't know was that the real leakers were much closer to Griffin and much better protected. That evening, Griffin summoned Harper to his office. His expression was thunderous as he threw a file on his desk. Care to explain this? Harper glanced at the file. Her stomach dropped. It contained her private research notes on Stroud's environmental violations. Where did you get that? She asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. It was found in the possession of a Washington Post journalist, along with confidential board minutes and financial records. And you think I leaked it? Griffin's laugh was bitter. Who else would it be? You've been distant for months, asking uncomfortable questions, meeting with environmental activists. I haven't leaked anything. Your naivete has put this company at risk. Your idealism has consequences, Harper. Dad, as of now, you're suspended from all company duties. Your access to Stroud systems is revoked. Harper stared at him in disbelief. You're suspending your own daughter? Based on what evidence? The evidence is clear enough. Griffin turned away. You chose your principles over your family, over me. As security waited to escort her out, Harper realized how completely her father had miscalculated. She hadn't leaked those documents. Not yet. But now, with nothing left to lose, she had every reason to share what she knew. Outside the building, a sleek black car pulled up beside her, the rear window lowered to reveal Darius Langston. "I heard what happened," he said. "We need to talk." Harper hesitated only briefly before getting in. Inside, Darius handed her a folder. Its title sent a chill through her. "The Stroud Legacy, It Ends With You." 3 days had passed since Harper's suspension. In a secure office space owned by one of Darius's subsidiary companies, Naomi Clark sat hunched over a computer, eyes burning from hours of searching through databases. "There has to be a master folder somewhere," she muttered, scrolling through endless files. Griffin wouldn't leave these decisions to chance. Victor paced behind her. "The server architecture is complex, deliberately so." "What about this?" Naomi pointed to a peculiar naming pattern. "These folders are labeled differently than the others. More numbers, fewer descriptors." Victor leaned in. "Can you access them?" "Let me try." After several attempts and multiple security bypasses, a password prompt appeared. Naomi sat back, frustrated. "We need someone who knows Griffin's patterns," she said. "His habits." "We have someone," Victor replied. "She's in the next room." Minutes later, Harper joined them, studying the password prompt. "Try Winchester 1947, she suggested. "It's the model and year of his grandfather's first hunting rifle. He uses variations of it for his most private accounts." Naomi typed it in. "Access denied." "What about Eagle Scout 84, Harper offered. "The year he made Eagle Scout." Again, "Access denied." Harper thought harder. "Wait, try Elizabeth 0722. "Who's Elizabeth?" Naomi asked, typing. "My mother. July 22nd was their anniversary." The screen blinked, then filled with folders. "Access granted." Naomi navigated through the files, opening documents at random. "This is it," she whispered. "The master folder." What they found was devastating. Internal memos revealed that Griffin had personally ordered the termination of multiple diversity initiatives after publicly announcing them. Acquisition agreements showed how minority-led companies were systematically gutted after purchase, their founders pushed out, their innovations absorbed into Stroud's portfolio. Most damning of all was a spreadsheet tracking problematic personalities, employees, who had raised ethical concerns, along with the actions taken against them. Marcus Chen's name was there, along with dozens of others. So was Naomi's, with a simple note: Phase 2 isolation in progress. "He's been doing this for years," Naomi said, horrified. "Systematically destroying anyone who challenges him." "Not just years," Victor added, pulling up an older file. "Decades." While Naomi, Harper, and Victor uncovered the truth, Victor's investigators were piecing together Griffin's past. In a small room filled with timelines and photographs, they traced the rise of Stroud Dynamics under Griffin's leadership. The pattern was clear. Competitors who stood in Griffin's way suffered mysterious setbacks. Financial troubles, regulatory problems, personal scandals. One by one they fell, allowing Stroud to expand unchecked. But the most disturbing case involved James Mercer, founder of a rival tech company in the early 2000s. After refusing Griffin's lowball buyout offer, Mercer was found dead in his garage. Carbon monoxide poisoning ruled a suicide. 3 weeks later, Stroud acquired Mercer's company for a fraction of its value. No direct connection to Griffin was ever established. But the timing was suspicious, to say the least. Walter Kane was growing desperate. The media storm wasn't subsiding. Board members were demanding answers. Griffin was becoming increasingly volatile. In his office, Walter reviewed surveillance footage of Naomi's movements, looking for evidence of betrayal. Most of it showed nothing suspicious, until he noticed her meeting with Harper 2 weeks ago, in the company cafeteria. It wasn't much, but it might be enough. With the help of the head of IT security, Walter doctored footage to make it appear as if Naomi was accessing restricted servers and downloading files. Armed with this fabricated evidence, he called Naomi to a private meeting. "I know what you've been doing," he said, sliding a tablet across the table. The doctored video played, showing Naomi supposedly stealing data. Naomi watched it calmly. "That's not what happened. It's your word against the evidence, and right now your word doesn't carry much weight around here. What do you want, Walter?" "Your resignation. Quiet, dignified, no severance but no criminal charges either." Naomi leaned forward. "I have a counteroffer." She produced her phone and played a recording of a conversation between Walter and a board member. The audio was crystal clear. Walter discussing how to manipulate financial disclosures for shareholders. "That's illegal," Walter sputtered. "You can't record private conversations." "Actually, this wasn't recorded by me," Naomi replied. "It was submitted to the SEC by another whistleblower. I just happened to have a copy." Walter's face drained of color. "So here's my counteroffer," Naomi continued. "You walk out that door, forget this meeting happened, and when the time comes, you testify about what Griffin ordered you to do. He'll destroy me. He's going to fall, Walter. The only question is whether you go down with him." Unknown to Griffin, Darius had been making strategic moves in the background. Through a complex series of holdings, he had quietly become a major stakeholder in 2 media outlets that regularly covered business news. The change was subtle, but unmistakable. Headlines that once fawned over Stroud's innovations now questioned its practices. Financial analysts who had praised Griffin's leadership now scrutinized his decisions. Investigative pieces dug deeper into Stroud's history, unearthing connections to polluted rivers, displaced communities, and broken promises. When Griffin's PR team reached out to friendly media contacts, they found closed doors where open ones had been. The narrative was slipping from their control. In her temporary office at Darius's building, Harper had been combing through decades of her father's correspondence. Most of it was unremarkable. Business communications, personal messages, nothing incriminating. Then she found it, buried in an email thread from 27 years ago. A short exchange between Griffin and Judge Howard Brennan. "Griffin, the Langston case has me concerned. His company's patents could cause problems down the line." Brennan, "Don't worry. I've reviewed the evidence. Thomas won't be a problem anymore." Griffin, "I appreciate your thoroughness. The club membership has been arranged as discussed." Harper's hands trembled as she reread the messages. Judge Brennan, the same judge who had presided over the case against Darius's father. The case that had sent Thomas Langston to prison. Her father hadn't just been a ruthless businessman, he'd corrupted the justice system itself. Harper printed the emails and placed them in a folder. Then she called Darius. "I found something you need to see," she said. "It's about your father." That night, as Naomi returned to her apartment, something felt wrong. The door was unlocked, though she distinctly remembered locking it that morning. Inside, her living room had been ransacked. Drawers pulled out. Books thrown from shelves, electronics missing. But she wasn't afraid. In fact, she smiled slightly as she surveyed the damage. They were too late. Everything of importance, every document, every recording, every piece of evidence had already been uploaded to secure servers beyond Griffin's reach. She made a single call. "It happened, just like you said it would." "Are you safe?" Darius asked. "Yes. They were looking for files, not me." "Good. It means they're desperate." His voice was calm, controlled. "The next phase begins tomorrow. Be ready." The next morning, Griffin Stroud called an emergency press conference to address the growing scandal. Standing before a forest of microphones, he projected confident indignation. "Stroud Dynamics has been the target of a coordinated cyber attack," he declared. "Confidential information has been stolen and manipulated to create a false narrative about our company." Reporters shouted questions. Griffin pointed to a friendly face from a usually supportive network. "Mr. Stroud, how do you respond to allegations that you personally ordered the termination of diversity initiatives after publicly announcing them?" Griffin blinked, thrown by the unexpected hostility. That's simply untrue. Stroud has been a leader in corporate diversity for decades. Another reporter jumped in. What about the leaked emails showing your involvement in the case against Thomas Langston 27 years ago? Griffin's composure cracked visibly. I have no idea what you're referring to. Judge Brennan. The club membership, the arrangement to ensure Thomas Langston was convicted. The press conference spiraled, out of control as reporters fired increasingly specific questions about incidents Griffin thought were safely buried. His denials became less convincing with each response. From the back of the room, Walter Kane watched in horror as 20 years of careful image management collapsed in real time. While Griffin faced the media, Stroud's board of directors was in emergency session. The room was tense, faces grim as they reviewed the mounting evidence against their CEO. We need to distance ourselves immediately, argued one director. The SEC investigation alone could cripple us. Griffin built this company, countered another. We can't abandon him based on stolen documents that may have been manipulated. The debate raged until the boardroom doors suddenly opened. A tech assistant hurried in, tablet in hand. I'm sorry to interrupt, but you need to see this. It's streaming live to the entire company. On the screen appeared Naomi Clark, seated at a desk with the Stroud logo visible behind her. To the board of directors and all employees of Stroud Dynamics, she began. What I'm about to share has been independently verified and is currently being delivered to regulatory authorities. For the next 20 minutes, Naomi methodically outlined the evidence against Griffin, the fabricated environmental reports, the targeted destruction of minority-led acquisitions, the personal vendettas against whistleblowers. She presented documents, emails, financial records, each more damning than the last. Griffin Stroud has betrayed not only his investors and employees, she concluded, but the fundamental principles of ethical business conduct. The decision before this board is simple. Will you continue to enable corruption, or will you stand for justice? The broadcast ended. Silence filled the boardroom. Finally, Richard Mills spoke. I move for an immediate vote of no confidence in Griffin Stroud's leadership. Hands began to rise around the table. In a darkened room across town, Darius and Victor watched the fallout unfold on multiple screens. News channels reported on the press conference disaster. Social media erupted with calls for Griffin's resignation. Stroud's stock was in freefall. Is it enough? Victor asked quietly. Darius considered the question, his expression unreadable. For a moment, he was that 9-year-old boy again, watching his father led away in handcuffs, his grandmother's words echoing, "Power is never given, it's taken." "No," he said finally. "Not yet." Victor nodded, understanding. "Then it's time for the final phase." Darius picked up his phone and made a call. "It's time," he said simply. "Make the call." As he ended the call, Victor looked at him, curiously. "May I ask what that was about?" Darius turned to face his friend, his expression resolute. "The SEC is about to receive evidence of something even Griffin can't survive." Dawn broke over the city, painting the skyline in hues of gold and orange. In his penthouse office, Victor Reed stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, phone pressed to his ear. His reflection showed a man who hadn't slept, his usually immaculate appearance slightly disheveled, his eyes focused with unwavering intensity. "This is an anonymous tip," he said, voice measured and calm. "I'm calling to report securities fraud, environmental violations, and corporate malfeasance at Stroud Dynamics." On the other end, an SEC representative began asking questions. Victor answered each one methodically, directing them to secure servers where evidence had been uploaded. Financial records spanning 2 decades, internal communications, board minutes, never meant to see daylight. "You'll also find evidence of offshore accounts used to hide profits and avoid taxation," Victor continued. "The primary account holder is Griffin Stroud, operating through shell companies registered in the Cayman Islands." When the call ended, Victor turned to find Darius standing in the doorway. "It's done," Victor said simply. Darius nodded once. "And now we wait." Harper Stroud sat alone in her apartment, surrounded by photographs and memories. Her childhood, captured in images of Sailing trips and ski vacations. Her father always at the center, always in control. The perfect family portrait, carefully crafted and maintained. Her phone chimed with a message from an encrypted number. Check your email. Private server. Password. Phoenix 95. The sender was unnamed, but Harper knew. Only Darius would use that. Password. Her birth year combined with the name of his secret operation. The email contained a single file. As it opened on her screen, Harper's breath caught. Financial records. Transfer authorizations. Board minutes from a company she'd never heard of, Ellison Biotech. And then a name she recognized instantly. Elizabeth Stroud. Her mother. Harper had been told her mother died in a car accident when she was 2 years old. Her father rarely spoke of Elizabeth, and Harper had learned not to ask. The pain seemed too raw, even decades later, but the documents told a different story. Elizabeth Stroud had been a brilliant biochemist, founder of Ellison Biotech, named after her grandmother. The company had been developing promising treatments for autoimmune diseases when suddenly, funding dried up. Key investors pulled out. Overnight, research was halted, patents were challenged. Within 6 months, Ellison Biotech declared bankruptcy. 2 weeks later, Stroud Dynamics acquired the company's intellectual property for pennies on the dollar. And Griffin Stroud, who had been a minor player in pharmaceuticals until then, suddenly became a rising star with groundbreaking patents. Harper's hands trembled as she scrolled through emails between her father and various business associates, discussing strategies to undermine Elizabeth's company, to destroy her. The final document was a medical report. Elizabeth Stroud hadn't died in a car accident. She'd taken her own life, devastated by the loss of her life's work, and trapped in a marriage that had been nothing but a business acquisition. The phone rang, startling Harper from her shocked trance. Darius. Now you know, he said quietly when she answered. How long have you known about this? Harper's voice was barely audible. I found the connection 3 years ago. I needed to be certain before sharing it with you. My entire life has been a lie. Not your life, Harper. Just the story you were told about it. She closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. What am I supposed to do with this? That's your choice, Darius replied. I believe in informed decisions. Now you have information your father kept from you. After the call ended, Harper sat motionless, staring at her father's face in a family photo. The man who had raised her. The man who had destroyed her mother. The man who had built his empire on stolen dreams and broken lives. Her decision was made before she even realized it. She reached for her phone again. Darius Langston had maintained public silence since the investors' summit, letting actions speak, louder than words. But now, as cameras and reporters filled the atrium of his corporate headquarters, he stepped into the spotlight. Dressed in a simple navy suit, he approached the podium with quiet confidence. No notes, no teleprompter, just a man with truth as his weapon. Good morning, he began, his deep voice carrying without effort. For those who don't know me, I'm Darius Langston. I don't often speak publicly, but today requires clarity. The room fell silent, reporters leaning forward in anticipation. 3 months ago, I agreed to partner with Stroud Dynamics on what I believed could be a transformative venture. That partnership ended before it began, in a moment many of you have seen. He paused, but didn't reference the handshake directly. What you haven't seen is the pattern behind that moment, a pattern of behavior spanning decades, a pattern that has destroyed companies, careers, and lives. For the next 30 minutes, Darius outlined Griffin's history of corporate sabotage, environmental violations, and personal vendettas. He connected the SEC investigation to specific violations, backed by documentation displayed on screens behind him. He revealed how Stroud had systematically undermined minority-led businesses while publicly championing diversity. This isn't about a handshake, Darius concluded. It's about power being wielded without accountability. It's about justice being manipulated by privilege. It's about a broken system that rewards those who break the rules. Questions erupted from the gathered press. Darius answered each with the same measured calm, never raising his voice, never showing anger. His composure made the revelations all the more damning. When asked about his personal motivation, Darius paused thoughtfully. 27 years ago, Thomas Langston was wrongfully convicted of fraud. That man was my father. The evidence against him was fabricated. The judge who sentenced him was compromised, and the company that benefited from his imprisonment was eventually acquired by Stroud Dynamics. A murmur ran through the crowd. So yes, this is personal. But it's also much bigger than me or my family. It's about whether we truly believe in justice and accountability, or whether those are just words we use when convenient. Walter Kane watched Darius's press conference with growing panic. His phone rang constantly, journalists demanding comment, board members seeking explanations, investors threatening to pull out. In desperation, he drafted a press release claiming the documents Darius presented were forgeries, part of a coordinated attack on Stroud's reputation. He distributed it to friendly media contacts, offering exclusive interviews with anonymous company sources who would debunk Darius's claims. But something had changed. Media outlets that had reliably carried Stroud's water for years were suddenly asking uncomfortable questions. Who were these anonymous sources? Could Walter provide evidence that the documents were forged? What about the SEC investigation? Was that fabricated too? In a last-ditch effort, Walter created a fake email from Naomi suggesting she had manipulated data to damage the company. He leaked it to a tabloid news site known for minimal fact-checking. The story appeared online within hours. Disgruntled executive sabotages Stroud Dynamics. Walter's relief was short-lived. Within minutes, Naomi was live on a competing network. Calmly dismantling the fake email with forensic precision, she presented timestamps, server logs, and video evidence proving she couldn't have sent the message. More damaging still, she revealed Walter's history of creating false narratives to protect Griffin, including evidence of paid influencers who promoted Stroud while pretending to be independent voices. By evening, Walter's reputation was in tatters. His phone stopped ringing. Even Griffin wouldn't take his calls. The SEC investigation moved with unusual speed, likely accelerated by the public attention and the comprehensive evidence provided. Stroud's stock plummeted another 40% in a single day as investors rushed to distance themselves from what was quickly becoming a corporate pariah. Griffin, barricaded in his office, railed against the betrayal. His assistant had quit. His PR team was in disarray. Even his personal lawyer had stopped answering his calls. When his private elevator opened to reveal 2 SEC agents and a federal marshal, Griffin's face drained of color. "Griffin Stroud?" the marshal asked. "My attorneys will handle this," Griffin said, reaching for his phone. "Sir, we have a warrant to seize all electronic devices and financial records on these premises. We also have a court order freezing your personal and corporate accounts." "This is outrageous. Do you know who I am?" The marshal's expression remained impassive. "Yes, sir. That's precisely why we're here." While Griffin faced the initial stages of what promised to be a lengthy legal battle, Darius arranged a private meeting with Stroud's board of directors. The setting was neutral ground, a conference room in a downtown law firm. The directors, already shaken by recent events, grew visibly uncomfortable as Darius entered alone, carrying a single folder. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," he began. "I'll be brief. Griffin Stroud has betrayed your trust and violated his fiduciary duty. The evidence is overwhelming and will only become more damaging as the investigation continues." Richard Mills, the senior board member, cleared his throat. "We've called an emergency shareholder meeting to address leadership concerns." "That's a start," Darius acknowledged, "but insufficient. The corruption extends beyond Griffin. This board has approved fraudulent reports, ignored ethical violations, and enabled systemic discrimination." "That's an unfair characterization," another director protested. "Is it?" Darius opened his folder and removed a document. "This is a sworn statement from your former head of diversity and inclusion, detailing how this board repeatedly blocked meaningful initiatives while publicly claiming progress. He placed the document on the table and removed another. This is testimony from 3 former executives describing how they were pushed out after raising ethical concerns about business practices that this board approved. One by one, Darius presented evidence implicating each director in Stroud's toxic culture. Not all had actively participated in wrongdoing, but all had looked the other way. All had chosen profit over principle. You have 2 options, Darius concluded. Resign voluntarily or face the same scrutiny Griffin is now experiencing. I've prepared statements for each scenario. The room was silent for a long moment before Mills spoke again. What do you want, Mr. Langston? Control of Stroud? Revenge? What I want is justice, Darius replied, and a corporate culture that doesn't destroy lives for quarterly profits. And you think you can create that? Not alone, but with the right leadership, yes. By meeting's end, 5 directors had agreed to resign. The remaining 3 would stay on to ensure continuity during the transition, with the understanding that they too would step down once new leadership was established. As Darius left the building, he sent a text to Victor. Phase 1 complete. Prepare for acquisition. The downtown Marriott's grand ballroom had been hastily prepared for Griffin's press conference. Once, such an event would have filled the room with supportive business leaders and friendly press. Today, the front rows held mostly Stroud employees, their attendance mandatory, their expressions anxious. Griffin Stroud approached the podium with the confident stride of a man accustomed to controlling the narrative. His suit was impeccable, his silver hair perfectly styled. Only those who knew him well would notice the tension in his jaw, the slight tremor in his hands. Thank you all for coming, he began, voice steady despite the circumstances. I stand before you today as the victim of an unprecedented attack on my character and my company. Cameras flashed as Griffin gestured emphatically, portraying himself as a businessman under siege. The SEC investigation is nothing more than a politically motivated witch hunt. The so-called evidence being circulated has been manipulated to paint a false picture of Stroud dynamics and my leadership. He continued for 20 minutes, weaving a narrative of persecution and conspiracy. Stroud was an American success story. He was a champion of innovation. The attacks against him were attacks against free enterprise itself. And behind it all, Griffin concluded dramatically, is Darius Langston, a man driven by personal vendetta rather than facts, manipulating media and regulatory agencies to destroy what my family has built over generations. The question period began, and Griffin's confident facade quickly crumbled. Reporters pressed him on specific allegations, citing documents and witnesses. Each denial sounded hollower than the last. When asked about his involvement in the case against Thomas Langston, Griffin's composure finally broke. I had nothing to do with that case, he snapped. This obsession with ancient history is exactly the kind of distraction Langston wants. As Griffin stormed off the stage, ignoring further questions, the damage was done. His performance had only reinforced the image of a man with something to hide. The following morning, Jessica Reed, a mid-level financial analyst at Stroud, sat nervously in a downtown coffee shop. Across from her was a reporter from the Wall Street Journal, recorder placed between them. I need to be clear, Jessica said, voice barely above a whisper. If they find out I'm talking to you, I'll never work in finance again. Your identity will be protected, the reporter assured her. Just tell me what you saw. Jessica took a deep breath. For 3 years, I've been tasked with preparing financial reports for the board and investors. The numbers I received never matched our actual performance. When I raised concerns, my supervisor told me it was standard industry practice to present data in the most favorable light. Were you asked to falsify specific reports? Multiple times, mostly environmental compliance data and diversity. Metrics. I have copies of the original data alongside what was actually reported. And who directed these changes? The instructions always came from Griffin's office, usually through Walter Kane. Jessica was just one of dozens of Stroud employees now coming forward. Some spoke anonymously. Others, like Jessica, provided documentation. Together, they painted a picture of systemic corruption that couldn't be dismissed as misunderstandings or mistakes. Harper Stroud had always avoided the spotlight, preferring to work behind the scenes on causes she believed in. But today, she sat in a television studio, lights bright, makeup freshly applied, waiting for the red light that would indicate she was live to millions of viewers. 3, 2, 1. We're joined today by Harper Stroud, daughter of embattled CEO Griffin Stroud, the host began. Ms. Stroud has requested this interview to address recent allegations against her father and Stroud Dynamics. Thank you for being here. Harper nodded, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Thank you for having me. Let me ask directly, do you believe the accusations against your father are true? Harper met the host's gaze steadily. Yes, I do. A murmur ran through the studio crew. That's a powerful statement, the host said. Can you elaborate? For years, I've witnessed troubling patterns at Stroud. As head of the sustainability division, I saw how environmental reports were manipulated. I raised concerns and was told to focus on my area of expertise. I convinced myself that change could happen from within. What changed your mind? Harper took a deep breath. Recently, I discovered that my father was directly involved in destroying my mother's company, Ellison Biotech. The official story I was told my entire life, that she died in a car accident, was a lie. The host leaned forward. Are you saying? I'm saying that my father built his empire by destroying others, including my mother, and I can no longer be complicit through my silence. For the next 30 minutes, Harper detailed what she knew, the falsified reports, the targeted destruction of competitors, the culture of fear within Stroud. I'm not proud of how long it took me to speak out, she concluded, but I believe in accountability, even when, especially when, it's painful and personal. In his private office at Langston Holdings, Darius watched Harper's interview with Victor and Naomi. None of them spoke until it ended. She's brave, Naomi said finally. She's Griffin's daughter, Victor pointed out. People might see this as a family feud rather than whistleblowing. It doesn't matter how they see it, Darius replied. What matters is that it's one more crack in Griffin's facade, one more voice he can't easily dismiss. He turned to Victor. Where do we stand with the final evidence? Victor opened his tablet. It's ready. The connection between Griffin and organized crime syndicates in the early 2000s. Financial transfers, meetings, communications, all documented. Once this reaches the SEC, it's no longer just about corporate fraud. It's potential RICO charges. And it's verified? Triple-checked. There's no plausible deniability. Darius was silent for a moment, weighing the implications. This wasn't just about destroying Griffin's reputation or forcing him from power. This would likely result in criminal prosecution, potential imprisonment. It would be the final irrevocable step. Send it, he said at last. Griffin Stroud had always prided himself on having contingencies for every scenario. As Stroud Dynamics crumbled around him, he activated his final desperate measures. First, he attempted to transfer millions from hidden accounts to overseas holdings where they couldn't be easily traced or seized. But the accounts had been frozen. Someone had alerted authorities just hours before he tried to access them. Next, he reached out to contacts in media ownership, offering exclusive stories that would damage Darius's reputation. But doors that had always been open to him suddenly closed. Calls went unreturned, emails unanswered. In growing desperation, he hired private investigators to dig into Darius's past, seeking anything that might discredit him. But Darius's life, while private, had been remarkably clean. His business dealings were ethical, his personal life discreet, but uncontroversial. The rare skeleton in his closet had already been publicly acknowledged and addressed. Griffin's final attempt was perhaps his most shameful. He approached a judge he'd known for years, suggesting that his legal troubles might disappear with the right guidance from the bench. The judge, already aware of Griffin's involvement with Judge Brennan decades earlier, recorded the conversation and reported the attempted bribery. By week's end, Griffin Stroud's assets were frozen, his reputation destroyed, his freedom in jeopardy. Former allies distanced themselves. Friends suddenly couldn't be reached. Even his country club membership was under review. The fall was complete, public, and irreversible. As Stroud Dynamics teetered on the brink of collapse, the board made a surprising announcement. Naomi Clark would serve as interim CEO while the company underwent restructuring. Her first press conference marked a dramatic departure from Griffin's style. No grand pronouncements or defensive posturing. Instead, she presented a clear-eyed assessment of the company's failings and a roadmap for fundamental change. Stroud Dynamics has betrayed the trust of its employees, its investors, and the public, Naomi began. Acknowledging that fact is the first step toward earning back that trust. She announced a comprehensive ethics overhaul, new leadership throughout senior management, and specific measurable commitments to environmental sustainability and diversity. This isn't about rebranding or quick fixes, she emphasized. It's about building a company that operates with integrity at every level. When asked about Darius Langston's role in the company's future, Naomi was direct. Mr. Langston has agreed to serve as a strategic advisor during this transition. His expertise in ethical business practices will be invaluable as we rebuild. Behind the scenes, the real arrangement was more significant. Through a carefully structured deal negotiated by Victor, Darius would acquire controlling interest in Stroud at a fraction of its previous valuation. The Stroud name would eventually be phased out, the company absorbed into Langston Holdings. More ethical corporate structure. Griffin Stroud's legacy would be systematically erased, replaced by a vision of business that prioritized sustainability, diversity, and social responsibility. The final blow came on a rainy Tuesday morning. Federal agents arrived at Griffin's Upper East Side townhouse with arrest warrants. The charges were extensive: securities fraud, wire fraud, obstruction of justice, and, most surprisingly to the public, conspiracy charges related to organized crime activities. News helicopters captured the image that would dominate headlines for days. Griffin Stroud, in a raincoat thrown hastily over pajamas, being led in handcuffs to a waiting vehicle. For Darius, watching from his office, the moment brought no joy, only a quiet sense that a circle had closed, his father's wrongful conviction balanced, however imperfectly, by Griffin's rightful one. He turned away from the television and focused instead on the future. Naomi had already begun implementing changes at Stroud. Harper was establishing a foundation in her mother's name to support women in STEM fields. Victor was coordinating the complex legal and financial aspects of the acquisition. The work of true justice, not just punishment but repair and reconstruction, was just beginning. That evening, in a small ceremony attended only by his closest associates, Darius announced the official launch of the Thomas Langston Initiative for Corporate Ethics. My father believed that business could be a force for good, he told the gathered few. Today, we begin proving him right. 3 weeks after Griffin Stroud's arrest, spring had brought new life to the city. Trees along Park Avenue displayed fresh, green buds and morning light streamed through the windows of what was once Griffin's corner office. Naomi Clark stood gazing at the view, contemplating the seismic shifts of the past month. The office still bore traces of its former occupant, the imposing mahogany desk, the strategic placement that ensured everyone who entered had to walk a gauntlet of Griffin's achievements mounted on the walls. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. Darius Langston entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Naomi and leaned against the desk. "You could change the decor, you know," he said, glancing around the space. "This room screams intimidation tactic." Naomi sipped her coffee. "I've been too busy stopping the company from imploding to think about interior design." "Fair point." Darius studied her for a moment. "How are you holding up?" "Honestly, I'm exhausted. The board meetings, the damage control, the reorganization." She sighed. "But it's necessary work." "It is," Darius agreed. "And you're the right person to lead it." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "Am I? I thought you were planning to take over Stroud." "I'm planning to save what's worth saving," Darius clarified. "The company needs a new direction. It needs your direction." From his jacket pocket, he withdrew a folded document and placed it on the desk. The board will announce this tomorrow, but I wanted you to hear it from me first. I'm recommending you for permanent appointment as CEO. Naomi stared at the document, momentarily speechless. I assumed you'd want control after everything Griffin did. I don't need a title to have influence. What I need is a partner who understands both what was broken and how to fix it. Darius moved toward the window. You've been fighting from the inside for years. Now you have the chance to make the changes you've always wanted. Naomi picked up the document, scanning its contents. This is unexpected. Is it? You were brave enough to risk everything to expose corruption. Who better to ensure it never happens again? A genuine smile, the first in weeks, crossed Naomi's face. There will be conditions, I assume. Just one, Darius replied. That you commit to building something better than what came before. Not just more profitable. Better. Naomi extended her hand. That's a condition I can live with. This time, the handshake sealed a partnership based on mutual respect, the antithesis of the one that had set everything in motion. In a sunlit cafe across town, Harper Stroud sat across from Darius, an untouched croissant on her plate. The past month had aged her, shadows under her eyes testifying to sleepless nights. Yet there was a new clarity in her gaze, a certainty that had replaced confusion. How are you? Darius asked. Still processing, Harper admitted. Finding out your entire life narrative was constructed on lies takes some adjustment. I understand that better than most. Harper nodded, acknowledging the truth of his statement. My father's lawyers keep calling. They want me to speak at his bail hearing, character witness. Will you? No. The word was firm, decisive. I've said what I needed to say, publicly and privately. A comfortable silence settled between them before Harper spoke again. I've been thinking about Stroud Dynamics, what it was, what it could be. I'd like to help with the restructuring. In what capacity? I know the company inside out, the good and the bad. I know which initiatives were genuine and which were for show. I could help Naomi navigate the transition. Darius considered her proposal. It won't be easy. Some will see you as a traitor to your father. Others will never fully trust you because of your name. I know, but turning away would be another form of running from the truth. I need to help fix what my family broke. Then I have a proposition for you, Darius said. The board is creating a new position, Chief Ethics Officer. The role would involve complete oversight of corporate conduct, with direct reporting lines to both the CEO and the board. Hope flickered in Harper's eyes. You're offering me the job? I'm suggesting you'd be uniquely qualified for it. Your insider knowledge combined with your proven commitment to truth would make you invaluable. Even though I was complicit for years? Sometimes those who've witnessed failure firsthand are the most effective at preventing its recurrence. Darius leaned forward. This isn't charity, Harper. It's strategy, and perhaps a chance at redemption, for the company and for yourself. Harper extended her hand across the table. I'm in. As spring melted into summer, Darius shifted his focus beyond Stroud Dynamics. The company's transformation was well underway, with Naomi and Harper steering its evolution from corporate predator to ethical leader. In a converted warehouse in Brooklyn, Darius gathered with community leaders from across the city. The space hummed with energy as representatives from education, technology, and environmental justice organizations mingled, curious about why they'd been invited. Darius stood before them, dressed simply in jeans and a button-down shirt. This wasn't a corporate presentation. This was personal. Thank you all for coming, he began. Many of you have worked in your communities for decades, with limited resources and little recognition. Today, that changes. He outlined a vision that had been forming for years, long before the confrontation with Griffin. A comprehensive initiative to direct substantial resources into underserved communities, focusing on education, technological access, and environmental restoration. This isn't charity, Darius emphasized. It's investment in our collective future, and it's long overdue. The program would provide seed funding for community-led businesses, scholarships for students from marginalized backgrounds, and infrastructure for sustainable development. But most importantly, it would be guided by the communities themselves, not dictated from above. My role isn't to tell you what your neighborhoods need, Darius explained. It's to ensure you have the resources to create solutions that work for your communities. As the meeting progressed to specific proposals and budgets, a young community organizer raised her hand. "Why now?" she asked bluntly. "You've had wealth and influence for years. Why this sudden focus on grassroots investment?" A fair question. Darius considered it thoughtfully. "It's not sudden," he replied. "It's the culmination of a long journey. Recent events removed certain obstacles and created new opportunities. But this has always been the plan. So taking down Stroud was just a step toward this? Justice and progress often travel the same road," Darius said. "What happened with Griffin Stroud opened doors that were previously closed. I'm simply walking through them and inviting all of you to join me." By meeting's end, the initial skepticism had given way to cautious optimism. Committees were formed, timelines established, and the first wave of funding allocated. A new kind of power was taking shape, not concentrated at the top, but distributed through networks of community expertise. Late that evening, Victor Reed sat alone in his home office, surrounded by documents. While the world focused on Darius's public moves, Victor had been orchestrating something more personal, more private. On his screen was a carefully constructed legal entity, Phoenix Holdings. Separate from Darius's main business interests, this company had been quietly acquiring properties and investments around the globe. Properties that once belonged to individuals who had aided Griffin Stroud in his rise to power. A subtle form of justice, invisible to most but deeply satisfying to Victor. Every corrupt judge, every complicit board member, every unethical partner who had enabled Griffin's empire. Their legacies were being systematically dismantled through careful financial maneuvering. Victor's phone rang. "Darius, are you still at the office?" Darius asked when Victor answered. "Just wrapping up some Phoenix matters." A pause. "How far does this go, Victor?" The question caught Victor off guard. "What do you mean?" "The secondary acquisitions, the targeting of Griffin's former allies. I didn't authorize that expansion." Victor's pulse quickened. He'd been careful to keep these activities compartmentalized, away from Darius's direct oversight. "It's a natural extension of our strategy, ensuring complete dismantling of Griffin's network. That wasn't our agreement. Sometimes justice requires going beyond the initial target. You know that better than anyone." Another pause, longer this time. "We need to talk. Tomorrow, my office." The call ended, leaving Victor unsettled. For 15 years, he'd been Darius's right hand, his fixer, his strategist. They'd shared a vision of justice against corrupt power, or so he thought. Now, for the first time, Victor wondered if their definitions of justice had diverged along the way. While Darius worked to reshape business relationships with underrepresented communities, Naomi was implementing radical changes. At what was now officially Langston Stroud International, the hyphenated name was temporary, a bridge between what was and what would be. In the main auditorium, Naomi addressed hundreds of employees, many watching remotely from global offices. For decades, this company operated on a simple principle: profit above all else, she began. That era is over. Our new mission centers on 3 equal priorities: profitability, sustainability, and equity. She outlined specific structural changes: transparent compensation practices to eliminate gender and racial pay gaps, environmental impact assessments for all projects, community benefit requirements for new developments, and independent ethics oversight for every division. Some of you may be wondering if these changes mean we'll be less successful financially, Naomi acknowledged. The evidence suggests otherwise. Companies with diverse leadership and ethical practices consistently outperform their competitors. Over time, she moved away from the podium, her tone becoming more personal. I know many of you are afraid. You're wondering if your jobs are secure, if your skills will still be valued, if everything you've worked for might disappear. Those are valid concerns. She scanned the audience, making eye contact with as many people as possible. What I can promise you is this. We will be transparent about our plans. We will provide training and support for anyone whose role is changing. And we will build something that you can be genuinely proud to be part of. Not just because it's profitable, but because it's right. The response was uncertain at first, tentative applause giving way to stronger support as the message resonated. Change was coming, but perhaps it wasn't something to fear. 6 months after Griffin's arrest, Darius attended the Global Economic Forum in Davos. Once a fortress of traditional corporate power, the forum had been forced to adapt to changing realities. Darius had been invited to speak on the future of ethical business. The auditorium was packed. Business leaders, politicians, and media figures filled every seat, drawn by curiosity about the man who had toppled one of their own. Darius approached the podium with characteristic calm, surveying the room filled with power brokers whose worldview he challenged. "We stand at a crossroads," he began. "For generations, we've operated under the assumption that business exists solely to generate profit. Everything else, environmental impact, social consequences, ethical considerations, was secondary at best, irrelevant at worst." He paused, letting the words settle. That model is not just morally bankrupt. It's practically unsustainable. The climate crisis, growing inequality, and social unrest aren't external problems for business to navigate around. They're direct consequences of how we've defined success. For the next 30 minutes, Darius outlined a different vision. One, where corporate success was measured not just by quarterly earnings, but by positive impact on communities and ecosystems. Not as charity or corporate social responsibility, but as fundamental to the business model itself. Some call this idealistic, he acknowledged. I call it necessary, and increasingly, so do consumers, employees, and investors. The question isn't whether business will change, but whether you will lead that change or be dragged into it kicking and screaming. The audience response was mixed. Skepticism from old guard executives, enthusiasm from younger attendees, thoughtful consideration from those in between. Darius hadn't expected universal agreement. Transformation never began with unanimity. What mattered was that the conversation had shifted. Ideas once dismissed as radical were now being debated in the heart of global capitalism. The stage was set for something new to emerge. As media coverage of Darius's speech at Davos circulated globally, a montage of his wider impact began to unfold. Community revitalization projects bearing the Langston Foundation name opened in neighborhoods from South Chicago to East Oakland. Scholarship recipients, primarily from underrepresented groups in STEM fields, began their studies at prestigious universities. Small businesses founded by immigrant entrepreneurs received crucial early funding. Each initiative addressed injustices similar to those Darius had experienced growing up. Barriers created not by lack of talent or effort, but by systemic inequities, designed to preserve existing power structures. The pattern was clear to those paying attention. Darius wasn't just accumulating wealth and influence. He was strategically redistributing it to communities that had been systematically excluded. And he was doing it quietly, without fanfare, focused on impact rather than recognition. Traditional media initially portrayed these efforts as philanthropy, the typical billionaire's attempt to burnish his image. But over time, a different understanding emerged. This wasn't charity. It was reconstruction, a deliberate attempt to repair broken systems and create new pathways to opportunity. In boardrooms and business schools, in community centers and policy institutes, the Langston model became a case study in how economic power could be wielded not just for personal gain, but for collective advancement. At a global summit on corporate ethics, Harper Stroud took the stage to a standing room only crowd. No longer just Griffin's daughter, she had established herself as a formidable advocate for business transparency and accountability. "A year ago, I was complicit in a system I knew was corrupt," she began. "I told myself I was fighting for change from the inside, but the truth is, I was afraid. Afraid of losing privilege, position, family." She paused, meeting the audience's gaze directly. That fear kept me silent when I should have spoken. It made me rationalize behavior that was clearly wrong, and it nearly cost me my integrity. For the next hour, Harper outlined practical frameworks for ethical corporate governance, specific structures, policies, and practices that could transform how companies operated. Her approach was concrete, grounded in her experience both as an insider and now as an architect of reform. Ethical business isn't just a nice ideal, Harper concluded. It's a practical necessity in a world where transparency is inevitable and accountability is increasingly demanded. The question isn't whether your company can afford to operate ethically. It's whether it can survive doing otherwise. As applause filled the room, Harper caught sight of Darius at the back, nodding in quiet approval. Their unlikely alliance had blossomed into a partnership that was reshaping corporate America. She, with her insider knowledge and hunger for redemption. He, with his strategic vision and unwavering commitment to justice. Together with Naomi, they were creating a new blueprint for what business could be. In his penthouse office, Darius faced Victor across his desk. The tension between them had been building for weeks, unspoken concerns hardening into unavoidable confrontation. "Explain Phoenix Holdings," Darius said, voice deliberately calm. "The complete operational structure." Victor maintained his composure, though his usual confidence had dimmed. "It's a necessary extension of our original plan. Griffin's network of enablers needed to be addressed. So you took it upon yourself to target them, without authorization." "I used my judgment, as I've always done," Victor replied. "These people helped Griffin destroy your father. They corrupted the system that should have protected him. And that justifies exceeding your authority?" Victor leaned forward. "Don't tell me you're developing scruples about how justice is delivered, not after everything we've done to bring down Griffin." "There's a difference between exposing corruption and becoming the very thing we fought against," Darius said quietly. "Is there? Or is it just a matter of who holds the power?" Victor's voice had an edge now. "You've always known I play the long game, Darius. I've been 3 steps ahead since the beginning, anticipating moves, creating contingencies, protecting your interests. My interests are yours." The question hung in the air between them. Victor stood, straightening his suit jacket. "I think after 15 years, I've earned the benefit of the doubt. Phoenix Holdings is securing justice on multiple fronts, nothing more, nothing less. By targeting people without due process, by unilaterally deciding who deserves punishment, as if what we did to Griffin was any different." Darius's expression hardened. Griffin was exposed through legal channels. Evidence was submitted to proper authorities. The system worked as it should. "The system worked because we manipulated it," Victor countered. "Let's not pretend otherwise." For a long moment, neither man spoke. 15 years of trust and shared purpose seemed to crumble between them. "I want Phoenix Holdings dissolved," Darius said finally. "All assets returned to their legal owners." Victor laughed, short and bitter. "That's not possible, and you know it. The acquisitions were legal, if strategic. The structures are in place. It's done. Then undo it. I can't. And if I'm being honest, I won't." Victor moved toward the door. "I believed we shared the same definition of justice. Clearly I was wrong." "Victor, you've achieved your revenge, Darius. You've remade yourself as the ethical businessman, the visionary reformer. Good for you. But don't expect me to pretend that what we did to Griffin wasn't personal. It was always personal for both of us." With that, Victor walked out, leaving Darius to confront an uncomfortable truth. In their pursuit of justice, had they crossed the same lines they'd condemned Griffin for crossing? 2 days later, in a private meeting room at her attorney's office, Harper finalized the documents for a public statement she'd been preparing for weeks. Her hands trembled slightly as she signed the last page. "Are you sure about this?" her lawyer asked. "It's not too late to reconsider." Harper nodded firmly. "It's necessary. For me and for everyone affected by my family's actions." The statement acknowledged her own role in Stroud's toxic culture, not just as a passive witness, but as someone who had benefited from and sometimes enabled her father's corrupt practices. It detailed specific instances where she could have spoken up but remained silent, and it committed to concrete acts of restitution. This goes beyond what's legally required, her lawyer noted. It opens you to potential liability. I'm aware, Harper replied, but legal minimum isn't the standard I'm holding myself to anymore. Later that day, the statement was published simultaneously in major newspapers and online platforms. The response was immediate and varied. Admiration from some, skepticism from others, outrage from Griffin's remaining defenders. What mattered to Harper wasn't the public reaction, but the private sense that she was finally aligning her actions with her values. The path to redemption wasn't about being forgiven. It was about becoming someone worthy of trust. Months passed. Seasons changed. The drama of Griffin's fall gradually faded from headlines, replaced by newer scandals and crises. But the impact continued to reverberate through corporate America, through communities touched by Darius's initiatives, through lives transformed by new opportunities. On a crisp autumn day, Darius returned to a place he hadn't visited in decades, the courthouse where his father had been convicted. The building looked smaller than he remembered, less imposing to adult eyes than to a child's. He climbed the stone steps slowly, memories washing over him. The fear and confusion of that day. His grandmother's steady hand in his. The last look his father had given him before being led away. Inside, the courtroom was empty, the day's proceedings finished. Darius stood in the center of the room, absorbing the symmetry of his journey. From powerless child to one of the most influential business leaders in the country, from victim of a corrupt system to architect of its reform. The circle was complete, the debt paid. The wrong, if not righted, at least acknowledged and addressed. As he turned to leave, his phone vibrated with a news alert. The headline made him pause. Griffin Stroud linked to 3 unsolved murders in pharmaceutical industry. Darius read the article with growing unease. The evidence connecting Griffin to these deaths was circumstantial but compelling. Financial transactions, threatening communications, suspicious timing. Exactly the kind of pattern they had uncovered during their investigation into Griffin's business practices. But Darius hadn't known about murder allegations. They hadn't been part of his evidence against Griffin. At the end of the article was a telling line. Sources close to the investigation credit anonymous tips from someone with intimate knowledge of Stroud's operations. Victor, it had to be. Still pursuing his own version of justice, expanding the scope of Griffin's crimes beyond what they had proven together. Darius put away his phone, troubled by the implications. Victor's actions raised uncomfortable questions about means and ends, about where justice ended and vengeance began. Questions Darius would need to confront, not just about Victor, but about himself. A week later, in what was once Griffin's office, Naomi signed the final paperwork making her appointment as CEO permanent. The room had been transformed, the imposing desk replaced with a round table, the walls now displaying art from local creators rather than trophies of corporate conquest. "Congratulations," Darius said, witnessing the moment. "It's official." Naomi set down her pen, a mix of pride and responsibility in her expression. "I never imagined this is where I'd end up when I brought you in as a potential partner." "Life rarely follows our plans," Darius observed. "Sometimes it offers something better. And sometimes worse," Naomi added. "I heard about Victor." Darius nodded, his expression sobering. A reminder that power can corrupt even those fighting against corruption. "Will you try to stop him?" "I'm not sure I can, or if I should." Darius gazed out the window at the city skyline. "The line between justice and vengeance is thinner than I once thought." Naomi joined him at the window. "That's why accountability matters, not just for others but for ourselves. It's the difference between what Griffin did and what we're trying to build." "You sound like you've given this some thought." "Every day," Naomi admitted. "Power comes with responsibility, whether it's in a corporate office or a community initiative. The question is always the same. How do we use it?" Darius considered her words. "By remembering its purpose, by ensuring it serves something larger than ourselves." Together, they looked out at the city. not as conquerors surveying their domain, but as stewards of something fragile and valuable, the possibility of change. In the final scene, Darius, Naomi, and Harper stood together on the stage of a newly opened community innovation center in the neighborhood where Darius had grown up. Behind them, young entrepreneurs from historically marginalized communities showcased their startups, their energy and potential filling the space with hope. The three made an unlikely alliance, the strategic investor who had learned that justice required more than revenge, the corporate executive who had found courage to challenge a corrupt system from within, the privileged heir who had chosen truth over family loyalty. Together, they represented a new approach to power, one that measured success not by dominance, but by positive impact. Not perfect, still learning, but committed to a different path. As they watched the young innovators present their ideas, Darius thought about the journey that had brought him here. It had begun with a simple public insult, a refused handshake that revealed the truth about power and privilege in America. But it would end with something far more significant, a fundamental shift in who held power, how it was used, and who benefited from it. The screen faded to black, the words, "Change is inevitable," appearing in white text. But they were followed by additional words, "Justice is not." For true justice, the kind that transformed systems rather than simply punishing individuals, required more than righteous anger. It required vision, strategy, and the courage to build something better from the ashes of what had been destroyed. That work was just beginning. What would you do if the system that wronged you finally lay within your grasp? Would you choose justice, revenge, or something more transformative? If this story of power, corruption, and redemption resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more thought-provoking narratives that challenge our understanding of justice and change.